Hi, it's Dwyer, November 30th, 2020. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Let's talk about Mike Tyson's fight, his draw with Roy Jones. But first, remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, first, let me say, as I make this video, Bitcoin is at an all-time high. For those of you who are looking for profits, take a look there, right? Let me also say, before I get into Mike Tyson, Roy Jones, let's give credit where credit is due, right? I know they called it a celebrity boxing match and stuff like that. We're going to follow talent wherever it takes us. It could even be to a celebrity. That Jake Paul KO of Nate Robinson, where Jake Paul is throwing a power combination while backing up, was big boy stuff, right? That KO shows you that Paul isn't really a celebrity who's moonlighting as a boxer. No, this guy's in the gym. This guy has advanced skills. If you're looking for easy profits, just look for Jake Paul's next celebrity fight, right? His opponents probably think that boxing isn't a sport for craftsmen. They're wrong. Let's just say that Jake Paul is learning the craft. I encourage people to look at that KO. It's in the fight right before the Roy Jones Jr. Mike Tyson fight, right? Look at that KO. Look at Paul's feet. Look at how he's moving when he lands the big shots. Not a lot of guys in boxing can do that. Let me also say this. I'm a big fan of Thomas Hauser. He's a writer who talks about boxing and stuff like that, and I know he represents a lot of people in the public. They look at this fight, the Roy Jones Jr. Mike Tyson fight, or the Mike Tyson versus Roy Jones Jr. fight, and they lament the fact that both guys are past their primes, right? They viewed the event really as a carnival show that came decades too late. I'm not from that side of the aisle. What I want people to do is to look at the so-called real fight between Daniel Dubois and Joyce earlier on Saturday, right? You know, Dubois is a young guy with a big punch. People were saying, hey, is he this generation's Mike Tyson? But what they overlook is the elusiveness that it takes a Mike Tyson or a Joe Frazier, for example, to get inside. It's not all about hand speed and power. So what I want people to do is to contrast Daniel Dubois coming in too upright, not elusive. He's there to get hit by Joyce's jab. And look at how Joyce riddles him, literally riddles him with jabs to the point where one of his eyes closes. Right to the point where Dubois, blind in one eye, realizes the fight's over. And I want you to contrast that with Mike Tyson, the person some folks were modeling Daniel Dubois off of. Here is Mike Tyson against Roy Jones Jr. And you'll notice Tyson comes in lower. You'll notice Tyson knows things that Dubois is just figuring out. Tyson's moving his upper body, isn't he? Right? Tyson has a shorter upper body. Tyson leans forward. He leverages the hard-to-find nature of his game. Right? He leans forward. He moves to the side. What I want people to do, too, is look at the spacing. Right? Daniel Dubois is fighting Joyce. Joyce has all kind of room to operate, doesn't he? He's landing a jab. It's stopping Dubois dead in his tracks. But yet Joyce still has room to operate. Dubois doesn't cut off the ring on it. Now contrast that with Mike Tyson. Look, I don't care if Mike Tyson's in his 50s. Boxing's a craft. Mike Tyson knows things that Daniel Dubois doesn't know. Right? Dubois is hoping to learn in the course of his career what Mike Tyson already knows. So Mike Tyson in his mid-50s, on the same day that Daniel Dubois has fought, is cutting off the ring against a more mobile opponent than Joe Joyce was. Right? Roy Jones in his 50s is more mobile than Joe Joyce. And what you'll notice is Jones doesn't have room to operate. Let me say this. You know, I love Christy Martin. I love Chad Dawson. I love Vinny Pazienza. Right? Hey, they're all former champs. But you and I know the real judges are our own two eyes. Mike Tyson won this 8-round fight by at least 4 rounds. At least 4 rounds. Understand what happens. Roy Jones starts the fight and he's moving. Right? Jones is trying to embarrass Mike a little bit. Jones knows he needs room to throw his punches. So Jones is trying to move. Here's the problem. He's fighting a guy who watched the Ray Leonard, Roberto Duran, no mas fight. And when Duran said no mas, Mike Tyson was devastated because he just was a big Duran fan. And he couldn't imagine Duran giving up in a fight. Well, here you had a Roberto Duran fan channeling Roberto Duran. He cuts off the ring on Roy. Mike, in his 50s, is having absolutely none of Roy Jones trying to move around the ring. So he gets inside on Roy. Folks, it's on demand. He gets inside on Roy, right? Look at the film. Mike's not Daniel Dubois. He's not standing upright, trying to walk right. No, Mike comes in low. At one point, Mike gets really low. Mike comes in low. Mike's aware of the spacing. So even though Roy has a hand speed advantage, Mike's not out there getting drilled to death by Roy's jab. Mike clearly learned from the Buster Douglas fight. He knows he can't hang outside and allow another guy to establish a jab. No, Mike gets low. Mike gets inside. Mike gets so close to Roy that this boxing match or boxing exhibition, if you want to call it that, becomes a hug fest. And let me just say this. While Roy is trying to hold on to Mike, and he's doing a much better job than most guys in their 20s would, while Roy Jones giving away 10 pounds, it seemed like 30 pounds, didn't it? Because Tyson just seemed much bigger than Roy, right? While Roy is holding on to Mike's hands, Mike gets a hand free and is riddling Roy Jones's body. Folks, because there isn't a crowd there, you heard Mike Tyson's punches. Mike Tyson in his 50s still hits hard. You heard the punches. You saw Roy Jones have his rib cage taken away from him. If you want to get to the truth of this fight, and it's the hard truth, what I want people to do is to look at the post-fight interview. Mike Tyson and Roy Jones with Jim Gray. It's on YouTube. I'll try to put a link to it in the comment section of this video. Now understand, Jones is the younger man. Understand, Jones is the guy who fought as recently as 2018. He's not Tyson, who's been out the ring for 15 years. Folks, it's Jones who can barely breathe. This is during the post-fight interview, and understand, Jim Gray doesn't hop in the ring right after the bell rings. No, this is in a world of social distancing. The fight ended. These guys walked to a new location. Time passes. Then there's Jim Gray interviewing the guys. So you would have thought if Roy Jones is winded, you would have thought that Roy Jones by that point would, be cool, calm, and collected. Folks, he's not. I'm telling you, it's Monday morning. And I'd be surprised if Jones is still not on a liquid diet. Not having his food diced and cut up, put in a blender. Right? I'm telling you, Roy Jones has got to be sore. Right? The kind of sore where when you're crawling into bed, it takes 10 minutes. Roy Jones, at the start of the Jim Gray interview, he's huffing and puffing. He has his hands up around his midsection. Has his hands up. That's not an act, folks. That's a guy who, over 8 rounds in an exhibition, let's put that in quotes, exhibition, got hit with the kitchen sink in the rib cage. We've seen Jones for decades, right? He gets jobbed in the '88 Olympics, right? He's been around for decades. Have you ever, in Roy Jones's career, even when he's fighting Denis Lebedev late in his career, have you ever seen an opponent take away Roy's midsection like Mike Tyson just did? Right? Let me also say this too. And by the way, Thomas Hauser, that's why these fights are important. It's because boxing's a craft. It's because these older fighters are the craftsmen with experience. It's because when we watch a Daniel Dubois, we understand he's not where Mike Tyson is. So when we get to watch Mike Tyson, even a Mike Tyson who's been out of the ring for 15 years, right? Mike Tyson knows certain things, that he has to bob and weave his way inside, that he can't stay at arm's length on Roy Jones, that when a guy ties him up inside, Mike needs to still use the opportunity to get a hand free, to work the other guy's body. Right? That Roy Jones, when faced with the guy who's inside on him, isn't going to stand there and try to foolishly trade like some young guys trying to make their stripes would do. No, Roy Jones understands, I need to grab this guy. I need to clinch. Jones understands the value of clinching. Right? So understand the fight itself is lopsided. Look at the CompuBox numbers. Right? Mike Tyson is boss. He's the one determining the spacing. He gets inside on Roy Jones. Right? In about the 6th round or so, Roy Jones does set up, and it's masterful. He does set up an excellent left hook. It lands on Mike. But understand, Roy Jones, even though he fought once at heavyweight in the past, wasn't Mike's size. Mike Tyson's accustomed to getting hit by heavyweights. That Roy Jones left hook would have ended a lot of fights at lighter weights. But this is boxing, and weights matter. Mike Tyson takes the punch. Understand, the fight could have changed on that punch. Mike Tyson takes the punch. Let me say this too. As you were watching this fight, and as you saw that Roy could not keep Mike off of him, that raised other questions. Why is it that when Mike fought Evander Holyfield, who beat him twice, Tyson has 6 losses, 2 of them are to the same guy. Think about that, right? There's 2 to Evander. You have 1 to Buster Douglas, right? The huge upset. You have the Lennox Lewis loss, right? Those are 4 of Tyson's 6 losses. The other 2, Danny Williams and Kevin McBride, right? Literally at the end of Mike Tyson's career. Well, as you were watching Tyson dive in a way that Daniel Dubois could not, against the slower moving Joe Joyce, right? By the way, gamblers, Joe Joyce hooked us up. More beer for us, right? Look at my pre-fight videos on that fight. But as you saw Tyson here on the inside, and it looked inevitable, didn't it? You were like, wow, who could keep Mike Tyson on the outside? Then you thought to yourself, well, whoa, wait a moment. Why is it when he fought Evander was the guy who was thriving on the inside? What was Evander doing in that fight to neutralize Mike Tyson on the inside? Well, folks, I'll just put it to you this way. That's why this genre is going to succeed. Because it forces you to revisit fight styles and past fights. It forces you to look at retired fighters and to realize and accept their greatness. Right? So you see Roy, and you see him overwhelmed by Mike Tyson getting inside. Right? And Tyson stays inside and is working over Roy. Then you start to think to yourself, it'd be interesting to see Mike Tyson against Evander Holyfield in this format. 2-minute rounds, 8 rounds. Because when Mike Tyson gets inside, that wouldn't be the end of the story. Right? Rather than try to hold and then move away like Roy did, Evander might actually say, great, this is where I want Mike. Has Mike Tyson figured out how to cope with Evander Holyfield putting his head under Mike's chin? Wasn't the ear biting because Mike Tyson claimed he was getting headbutted? Who, in his right mind, would fight Mike Tyson so deep in the pocket that Mike Tyson is complaining of headbutts? So, I understand this event was a huge financial success. I'm telling you, it delivered far beyond my expectations. I thought Snoop Dogg was outstanding. I thought Morrow, the Showtime announcer, was outstanding. I loved the focus on older fighters, right? Ray Leonard, Mike Tyson, Roy Jones Jr. I love the introduction. It almost seemed like a Saturday Night Live skit where they're introducing Roy Jones. And then the list just kept going. Right? They said, yes, the light heavyweight champion, the former heavyweight champion. You listen to the resume on Roy Jones and you realize, my God, this guy has accomplished a lot. In other words, as Roy used to say, y'all must have forgot. Well, this fight reminded you. Right? This was one of those events that was a rare event that delivered like the Conor McGregor-Floyd Mayweather fight delivered. So, from a boxing stylist type point of view, right, where you're looking at styles and you realize some of these young guys are doing things differently than some of the masters have done things. I thought this fight totally delivered. Just the contrast of Daniel Dubois from earlier in the evening to Mike Tyson, right? The elusiveness coming inside, the ability to cut off the ring, things that young guys who are more physically dominant really can't do. Just the foot speed still on Mike Tyson. In other words, Tyson doesn't look in a rush, but yet he's cutting off the ring. And you're thinking to yourself, man, I've seen some young guys out there not be able to cut off the ring at any time during 12 rounds. And Tyson here is cutting off the ring effortlessly. Also, don't fool yourself. I know they called it an exhibition and people are saying, oh, this draw, come on, were they serious? Folks, look at the camera in Roy Jones's corner between rounds. Jones is in distress. Jones is exhausted. He's exhausted. Understand, he's been hit with wicked body shots. Right? If that's not a fight, I don't know what is. In the comment section, please do tell us. When's the last time you saw Jones hit with this many body shots? So I had Tyson winning the fight at least 6 rounds to 2. I look forward to more of these old-timers matches. You know, for several years now, I've always wondered what a rematch between Lennox Lewis and Vitaly Klitschko would look like, for example. Right? I like the format. The 2 minutes made it such that as the fighters started to run out of gas a little bit, the bell would sound. Right? The fight had a certain pacing to it that worked. You didn't get the feeling that a fighter was out of gas and, oh, guess what? Another 60 seconds are on the clock. Right? I even like the 8 rounds. Tyson, by the way, came out of the 8 rounds looking good. Looked like Tyson could have gone another 4 rounds. Roy Jones, by contrast, looked like he was looking for a stool. Understand, Jones was the more active fighter before this. Jones was the younger guy by a few years. Right? So, thumbs up from me. I thought Tyson won the fight. I'm looking forward to more of these involving both of these fighters. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I know there's a difference of opinion out there. Rather than judge Mike Tyson in his mid-50s with Mike Tyson in his 20s, and understand both guys still have punching power, why don't we appreciate the skills that these guys are bringing to us? Jones's left hook, by the way, Jones is outside, he's dancing around, he throws a little innocuous flurry, then bam, comes in with a hard left hook that lands flush, right? I appreciated the work. Not only that, Jones had fast hands. Fast hands for anybody, much less a guy in his 50s. Right? Thumbs up from me. Let me know how you saw the fight. I hope you leave those comments in the comment section of this video. Thanks for stopping by.